All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome again to our annual federal tax workshop for non-residents, primarily serving our international students and scholars here at UC Santa Cruz. My name is Andy Ng. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the Assistant Director of International Programming here at International Student Services and Programming, or ISSP for short, as part of Global Engagement. And I'm excited to be joined today by Lana Ballo, who is here from Glacier Tax Prep and from Financial Affairs at UCSC to really help guide us through the process of how do we file taxes as non-residents, as international students and scholars. So I wanted to reiterate that this session will be recorded and uploaded to the ISSP website afterwards for your convenience. And we will have a short Q&A session following our presentation today from Lana. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Lana.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. I have a huge crowd today. I'm so impressed at how you were able to join us today. And my name is Lana Ballo, and I'm payroll manager and Glacier lead administrator here at UCSC. Our intention today is to give you basic understanding of federal tax filing requirements, provide you with tools and information that should help you to make this process easier and more understandable what is the requirements, so to avoid any confusions. So we will talk about basics of federal tax, U.S. federal tax return, and then the IRS. We'll talk about tax form, tax filing requirements for residents and non-residents, discuss Glacier tax prep system and support, and understand a little bit better the difference in fellowship scholarship tax reporting. So for everybody who is here to talk about Form 8843 is not U.S. tax return. So all international students and scholars here in U.S. are required to complete this form. When you don't have any U.S. source income, you don't need Social Security, and it's not federal tax return. And I'm not an expert in this form. So if you're here only to learn what is 8843, it's not U.S. tax return. So please follow these instructions on website and complete it based on online wizard. And before we start talking about taxes, let's talk about who is collecting our taxes. So we have two agencies here. We have most of us in California. So we have the IRS, Internal Revenue Service, which is federal U.S. government responsible for collection of federal taxes and enforcing tax law. So they have their own website with a lot of information. And what I wanted to include here, they also provide with free federal and state tax filing providers. So if you're not using Glacier, I will explain later why wouldn't you use Glacier, you can just go here, and if you're making less than $48,000, you can file your taxes for free, and it will include state tax filing providers. In addition, we have a California Income Tax Authority. They call Franchise Tax Board, and they have their own website. They also provide you with free California tax filing. So some of you will be asking today, oh, Glacier prepares only federal tax return. Where would I go to prepare California tax return? This is where you will go. It's very easy. It's today we will discuss a lot of complications for being non-resident and residents for federal tax purposes. For California, it's pretty simple. If you were in California here whole year, you're resident. If you came in the middle of the year, say you arrived here in June, then you are partial year tax resident. So you only complete your information for the partial year. They call them non-resident of California. So I'm not going to be talking about California today. Now, from all my next slides, we'll be talking about federal tax filing. So we have a lot of taxes in the U.S. Some of them are federal taxes, state taxes. We have Social Security taxes, sales tax, property, and many, many more. The U.S. tax law is very complex. And today we'll be talking about federal individual income tax. So what is subject to tax? Pretty much every single payment you receive, you have to report on your US tax return. And it will be compensation, wages, if you work for UCSC or you work for another employer. If you receive non-qualified scholarship and fellowship, which is taxable scholarship and fellowship, we'll talk about it later today. If you receive prize awards, capital gains, dividends, bank interest, if you decided to be an Uber, a DoorDash driver, if you won money in Las Vegas, everything has to be reported on US tax return. Our focus today will be compensation and wages, because some of you are working for UCSC, and a lot of you will be filing tax returns because you were receiving non-qualified scholarships and fellowships. So how does the IRS collect your federal tax information? How does they know how much money you made? So all employers are required to collect information when we pay you, we withhold taxes or we give you exemption from taxes, and we are required to report everything to the IRS. At the end of year, we prepare Form W-2, 1099, and 1042s, as depending on what kind of employer or contractor or students you were, and we'll send it to the IRS. You also receive these forms. You take these forms and you prepare a tax return based on them. So when you file your tax return, IRS compares information with what employer sent and what you sent, and they reconcile it and then decide what to do about it. So here in US, we require to prepare two returns. One is federal US tax return and state tax return. If you live in a state where we require to have a withhold tax, like income taxes. So pretty much tax return is a summary of all of your income and tax payments throughout the year. When you work for the employer, most likely your taxes withhold already correctly. But if you have additional income, a different personnel case for each person, there could be a slight or big difference between how much you paid and how much you underpaid. So by completing tax return and disclosing all our income and indicating how much tax we paid during calendar year, we determine if there is a balance due, if we pay too much, so we'll get money back with our tax return, or we have to pay more. If there is a balance due, we didn't pay enough, we have to pay it. Just to emphasize here, some of you had the tax treaty exemptions, so you were not required to pay federal taxes. You still have to file US tax return and show it to the IRS that you receive money and you was allowed to have tax exemption. And tax status of resident or non-resident will determine what tax form you will receive. And today's our focus will be discussing the difference. So very important information. Tax year in US is calendar year from January 1st until December 31st. So all the money you receive during that period, it's taxable. Some of you were working in 2024 for UCSC and you worked in December, but you receive your paycheck in January. So that's already 2025 income, not 2024. So only income that you receive in 2024 is reported on your W-4 or 1042S, and that's what you will be reporting on your tax return. The deadline, the tax returns are due on April 15 for the prior year. So right now we file in 2024 tax return, which we must to file by April 15. We are allowed to have extension to file our taxes until October 15. So, We can get busy. We don't want to file taxes. So we can procrastinate all the way until October only if you file the extension. So you have to go on IRS website and file an application for your tax return to be extended. You will be allowed to do that very easily. But if there is a balance on your tax return, you have to pay it by for April 15, or penalties and interest will be assessed. So we just want to tell you, forget about October 15 deadline. Go do your tax return by April 15 and be done. In addition, if some of you are already living and went back to home country and living outside of US, you have deadline until June 15. That covers also paying balance until June 15. So you're not going to be penalized for April 15. So let's talk about why Glacier is important. Many of you had to complete Glacier requirements here. So, and the reason we're doing it, it's very important because we have a two tax system in the US. One is US tax resident system and one is non-resident alien system. So an individual tax residency status determines the federal tax withholding rate on payments. And there are two types of tax residency status: non-resident alien for US tax purposes and resident alien for US tax purposes. It has nothing to do with immigration. It's not making you to become a permanent resident or green card holder. It's purely for how to determine your tax rate. And again, all the foreign nationals who receive payments in US could be taxed as residents and non-residents. So before you jump and completing your tax returns, if you have a Glacier account, I suggest you to download this tax summary report, because when you sign it, you probably didn't even know why you had to do it, or it was such a long time ago and it was hard to understand all these like complex like words, what they mean. So it's actually a very helpful form for you to understand right now when you're preparing your tax return. It will tell you the tax residency status, resident versus non-resident, changes if you're non-resident. It will show you when you're going to become a resident. It also shows you the tax rates, like for example, if your fellowships is taxed at 14%, or if you receive some kind of income, it's taxed at 30%, or for non-resident, it will show you that you tax as at the rates of single person. Non-residents cannot be taxed at rates of married person or other rates. So that this summary, it's provide you with all the information. Also, it shows you if there is any tax treaty applicable. We'll show you tax treaty exemption limits and the time frame when you're going to be covered by tax treaty exemptions. So it's very helpful for you to download and review it before jumping to do your taxes. So now let's talk about these two systems. We have US tax systems for non-residents and residents. I will start with residents because maybe if you're already resident, the rest of this presentation is not going to be applicable for you. So let's talk. US tax resident system, when people in US are taxed on worldwide income, and all the worldwide income is included in Form 1040. There is three categories of people who have to file Form 1040. US citizens, lawful permanent residents, green card holders, and both categories, it doesn't matter where they live, if they have a green card, and if they are US citizens, if they live abroad, they still have to file this Form 1040 as resident. And the third category, which is very important for us to understand today, is who are resident alien for tax purposes. Resident alien is going to be subject to tax as US citizen and green card holders, and they will not be provided with Glacier tax prep because there are so many providers who can help you to file taxes online or in person. And there is, like I mentioned, there is a free tax providers through the IRS website. So don't panic if you realize you're tax resident and now nobody can help you because your Glacier tax prep is not available for you. There is a lot of stuff. And I actually was using this IRS free file for all of my kids while they were in college. And I found it's much more easier to navigate the TurboTax. If you qualify, if you're below that limit, so you can file free taxes, it's so simple. So don't worry about that. Now let's talk about how you become a resident. If you're foreign nationals, you came here on visa, why somebody call you a resident? So a resident alien for tax purpose is the person who meets substantial present test. It pretty much determines how long you've been in US. And I provided you with a link if some of you would like to understand it better, what is a substantial present test is. But in the simple formula, you have to be in US during current year for 31 days. If you were in 31 days, you're looking at the formula. So calculate all your days in the current year. We're talking about 2024 today. Then you look back and you multiply that by 1/3. So you will take 1/3 of preceding year and 1/6 of the second preceding year. I don't know who come up with these formulas, but here's a formula. And if you are in the US for 103 or 103, more than 103 days, you automatically become tax resident. If you were here for less than 182 days, you're non-resident. So if you're resident, go to the previous slide and file your tax returns using any available online resources. If you're non-resident, we'll be talking with you until the rest of this presentation, and I will help you to tell you what to do and how to do it. So we have exceptions to this formula of substantial present test, as many of you already know. All F1 and J1 students, they do not count first 5 calendar years here. So they don't look at this formula. They're going to be non-residents for 5 years. If you are in the US longer, if you continue studying or working, then you're going to start calculating the substantial present test. Similar apply to J1 visa holders, usually are professors and scholars. So they do not count any days for 2 of 7 calendar years of presence in the US. So just to make it easy for you, go to Glacier and download your document, and we'll tell you exactly if you're resident or non-resident, and if you have still exempt as a visa holder. All other visas, they have no special rules. They have to use substantial present test. So now let's talk about non-resident alien system. So when you're non-resident and say you arrive in the middle of the year and you had a job somewhere in India until June and then you come here. So if you're non-resident, you do not include anything that you earn outside of US. So you only include incomes that you received while in the US. We as a university understand how complicated this tax filing for non-residents are. So we engaged our company called Arctic International, who provide us with this Glacier tax prep software, which is also part of the Glacier system, and is specifically designed for the non-resident aliens. So we have a license to assist you with completing your US federal tax form 1040-NR. So to access that, I already sent, if I know about you, and if you have a filing like maybe requirements, I already sent you access to this GTP. If you need it, please let me know if you haven't received it. Here also, like since we have the slides, I added the link. We have this Foreign National Visitor Non-Resident Glacier Guide, which you always can review to understand the requirements for like if you receive different types of payments. So let's talk a little bit about this Glacier Tax Prep homepage. When you log in, at that point, you may don't know if you were non-resident. So you will be able to get to this point, the homepage, and Glacier will determine if you're resident, they will not allow you to proceed to prepare tax return. But if you're non-resident, then you will continue to do this tax prep. So now I'm gonna have this little commercial for Glacier Tax Prep because it's very important to understand what you're getting yourself into. What is amazing about our Glacier Tax Prep is comes with very experienced tax expert who are assisting non-resident all their life. People who work there created this program, which is GTP program, more than 20 years ago. And everybody who work for them, they have to be very, very experienced, have many, many years of experience. They host live webinars. Every year, this is becoming more and more popular, and more people who use Glacier would like to participate in these live webinars. So when you have access to this GTP, go to the link that provides you with all the dates. So I just included, look how many live webinars they have. And they will provide you with more information and more details about tax prep, about tax filing, and you will be able to ask live questions, like specifically that impact your personal tax filing. So I highly recommend you to go to Glacier GTP, participate in one of the live webinars, ask questions if you have questions, and also they have a help link. They don't have a phone line. They don't want to have a phone line so something can be lost in translation or misunderstood because we're dealing with the law. So they prefer to answer all your questions in writing. So use the help link and they will respond to you. So now let's talk about what do you need to start preparing your tax return. Similar, when you are completing Glacier, you will need your passport, you need all your visa information, and travel dates. If you forgot your travel dates, you always can download Form I-94 because it has travel data, Form W-2, and 1042-S. I will talk a little bit more about these forms, but not everyone has both. Like I'm getting emails from students and other people, other employers, and they asking me, where is my W-2? I only see 1042-S. It's not everybody get both, and I will explain who gets what. And another thing is, if you don't have Social Security, do not mail your tax return without Social Security. It will be lost. So you will, again, I will explain how to apply for Social Security ITIN with your tax return. But remember, never mail your tax return if you don't have a Social Security. So here we go. If you receive income from UCSC or other employer, you may receive Form 1042-S and or Form W-2 or multiple forms. You can actually receive different Form 1042-S if you had wages and if you had fellowship income. So those will provide you with two forms. And again, not everybody gonna receive both. You may have only W-2 or you may have only 1042-S. So who are gonna receive Form 1042-S? If you were employee with a tax treaty exemption, if you receive scholarship, fellowship, taxable or treaty exempt. So all these forms are available in Glacier, and they're available since February 11. Download them from your Glacier. If you work for the UCSC, Form W-2 are available on the dashboard. If employee with no tax treaty exemption or overtime dollar limit, like if you had some exemption, that goes on Form 1042-S, and the rest of income goes on Form W-2. So when you prepare your non-resident tax return, you only need to include US-related income. If you work outside of the US, do not include incomes that you earn abroad. If you never came to US and you work remotely or studied remotely, you don't need US tax return. If you work in the US for part of the year and work abroad for the rest of the year, you have to prepare US tax return only to report that part of that way while you're still in the US. So now let's talk about qualified education expenses versus non-qualified. So some of you receive fellowships and you were required to complete Glacier, and some of them you didn't require complete Glacier. So qualified fellowship when you receive, and you were not required to complete Glacier because the amounts were non-taxable. You were agreed that you will use those money for tuition and course-related expenses like such as books and suppliers. They are not reported, they don't need to be reported on your tax return. Non-qualified taxable fellowships, everything else that doesn't cover tuition and course-related materials. Some of you were receiving housing supplements, some of them got different fellowships and awards and honorarium. So all of that information has to be reported on your S tax return. So just to remind everybody here, if you were asked to complete Glacier in order to receive your fellowship payments, those fellowship payments are taxable. We already determined they are taxable. This is now just, now you need to know how to report it, yes? There is a lot of confusion when you have Glacier and you didn't pay any taxes. You receive money, but there was no tax withhold. I highly recommend go to Glacier, download your form, and read Glacier tax summary, because every single payment that was paid to you and that was Glacier was required, it means it's taxable. What is confusing here, when you're a tax resident, university is not required to withhold taxes. So because it's a different tax filing system for US, we cannot withhold taxes from you. So you're just gonna be reporting your information on tax return. And tax residents, you may receive Form 1098-T that will provide you with details. Also, here is a link how to properly report fellowship payments when you tax residents and you don't have assistance as a Glacier. For tax non-resident without a tax treaty, the university has already calculated and retained taxes. All we just gave you Form 1042-S, and you need to include it on your tax return. For tax non-resident with a tax treaty, the university provided you with Form 1042-S to show that your income was excluded from taxes. So you will just again complete tax return and take information from 1042-S. And again, reporting scholarship and fellowship, it depends if you're required to file tax return or not. If it's tax-free, you don't file a return. If you are not free, you file return. But again, depending on your status, it could be within the limits that you're not required to file tax return. So when you start preparing your tax return, don't be surprised if you will get a message. I'm talking this about tax residents, or you actually don't need to file your tax returns because personal exemptions were higher, and even you will receive taxable money, you may be not required to file. So it's a little tweaks. It's US tax law is not very simple and straightforward. So you just have to complete your information, and it will depend based on your personal individual situation. I get emails from students and scholars who ask me why my friends are not getting as much tax as I do, why my coworker is not paying as much tax as I do. It's not that simple. Everybody's tax situation depends on how many days away in US, what visas they have, what incomes they had. So you cannot compare yourself to others. So just if you have questions and you have access, for example, to Glacier Tax Prep, just ask them if something doesn't make sense to you. Now let's talk about Social Security. Like I've mentioned earlier, you cannot file your tax return without Social Security because our documents are connected through numbers, not through names. So you will need Social Security number or individual taxpayer identification number. Most of you already know that calls ITIN. ITIN is temporary number. If you had ITIN and received Social Security later, use Social Security because Social Security is now your permanent number and taxpayer numbers can expire in a few years. There is option for you to apply for Social Security ITIN when you file US tax return. You will need to complete Form W-7 and attach everything what is required on that list. Some people ask me, do I need to supply original documents? No. You go to your international students organization, to Andy, and they will help you with a letter to show the letters provides you that you're a student and you don't need to provide original documents. You only will send copies of your documents with your tax return. Okay, now let's talk about something very important things that many of you ignore, and I know that because I deal with those kind of situations. If the IRS sent you a letter, do not ignore it. Respond. IRS will never send you emails unless you filed your tax return last year and you specifically and explicitly requested them to communicate with you by email. So if you get any kind of email from IRS, even if you ask for permission to use your email, do not respond to any email, call IRS. Scam is getting worse and fake emails is getting more and more misleading. And they are specifically hunting for foreign nationals because they know it's very vulnerable population who are afraid to make mistakes, who are afraid to lose visas, and they target foreign nationals with all this scam from the IRS. Even if you believe that it looks legit, do not ever respond in writing, an email, or by text. Always call to the IRS. Yes, it may take you a few minutes to wait until somebody answers at the IRS, but they will be able to check your records and tell you what is required. Another thing, it's very long time for non-residents to get refund. If you expect refund, if you file your tax return and there is a refund, it may take 10 months to get refund. I know it's very disappointing, but it's just the way it is. And the good news, you always can check on status of your tax refund. Use this link, and you can check on status of your refund and call the IRS to see why it takes so long. And here I also grouped some like some information here, which I find could help you with navigating. So of course we have our ISSP website, which is supported by our university and is very good, and we try to keep it up to date. There is IRS website for filing extension. It's not automatic. You cannot get extension until October if you just decide to do so. You have to apply for it. If some of you had questions about Form 8843, there is more information about it. IRS phone, I provided here because I couldn't even find it. It was so hard to find on website. So here you go. And also they have a various like help links that may be relevant to you. In addition, they have this interactive tax assistant tool that also may be helpful for you if you like a tax resident and need more kind of help with navigation. And I think that's it. Andy, I covered everything what I thought could be helpful.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lana. Before we end the recording today, I know we have a pretty common question in the chat box that I do want to ask and address. And the question is, as an F1 and or a J1 student, do we have to file taxes even if we didn't make any income the taxable year?
All right, so that was my first slide. I think you join us later. No, you just have to file that form. That form is required to be filed as a foreign student, but it's not tax return.
Great. Thank you, Lana. I'm going to go ahead and end the recording now. And again, this will be uploaded to the ISSP website afterwards.